With Philadelphia Eagles training camp right around the corner, we take a look at some X factors on offense and defense, who this team cannot afford to lose on either side of the ball, and a new series, Gino's Guide to Scouting, where I take a look at Devon Allen's interesting topic on play speed, all that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in, everyone, to another edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Every day you want to get in on the action, you find us here. Our everydayers, we thank you for joining us wherever you get your podcasts and in video form on YouTube as well. If this is your first 100th, 1000th episode tagging along with us here at LOE, we thank you. I'm your host, as always, leading you 5 days each and every week. Well, we're around 3 this time of the year, but we will get back into 5 days a week, each and every show. I'm Gino Camilleri to take you into this Thursday edition. And I want to start off talking about the X factors on offense and defense before I conclude the show, doing something new, an informative topic that is near and dear to my heart, talking about scouting, a little guide to scouting, as you will. And Devon Allen had an interesting article come out the other day talking about how he said he was the fastest player in the NFL. And I thought, what a great way to get into the topic of play speed and some things that go along with scouting. But before we do that, we know that training camp is just a few short weeks away. We are in July. July 4th is past, the official end of the summer for many people in football. This is going to be a wild next 2 months. And for the Eagles, we know there's a lot of decisions to be made at the bottom of the 53. We know when cutdowns come. It's going to be intriguing to see who they bring in. Do they want to bring in some competition at the quarterback position for that third spot potentially? Do they want to bring in maybe another safety off of the market, or do they look at a trade? But there's going to be bright lights on a few players that if they're off the football field, it could make or break the football season for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I look at starting with the offense. You look at quarterback, we know if you lose Jalen Hurts, that's the end of the season. If you lose one of your offensive linemen, you have enough depth there to get by. Running back as well. Wide receiver, if you're down AJ or Devontae for any extended period of time, that wouldn't be great. But I believe you could still win football games with the other guys that you have there. When it comes to the tight end position, there might not be one guy who carries more of the offensive load on his shoulders right now than Dallas Goedert does. Because it was evident when Dallas Goedert went down last year, and anytime he's went down post Zach Ertz's departure, that they did not have a contingency plan in place post Zach Ertz trade. And Zach Ertz, hopefully he could find a way to get out of Arizona, but unless he comes back to Philadelphia, they have to find a way to find a backup plan for Dallas Goedert. Because if Dallas goes down, what do you have there? You have journeyman Dan Arnold. You have Tyree Jackson. You have Dalton Kincaid, who's been around the NFL on multiple teams within his first couple of years in the league. You have Jack Stoll and Grant Calcaterra, who were good second and third guys for you last year, but in a deep roster, are they going to be part of your plan? And why Dallas Goedert holds so much on his shoulders is because there's frankly not many people like him in the National Football League at all, and let alone in Philadelphia outside of him. Dan Arnold, he might be a bit of an upgrade over Grant Calcaterra, over Jack Stoll. But when you look at Dallas Goedert, he's a top 3 receiving tight end, top 3 tight end any day of the week in any specific category. When it comes to blocking, when it comes to his ability in yards after the catch, when it comes to his ability in the middle of the field, giving Jalen Hurts that weapon that is so good for them. And at times, he has been the focal point in the offense in areas that they might have been weak at. If you look at the screen game over the last year or so since Nick Sirianni has been here, when it comes to the wide receiver and the running back screen game, it hasn't been great. But the one play that seems to continue to work is that tight end screen, and it's because Dallas Goedert has that ability to be deceptive and athletic and intelligent all at the same time, which make him such an incredible football player. And we talked about the idea of potentially adding one of these high-profile tight ends in the draft this year. And why was that? Well, we saw the benefit of having those two top-level tight ends. And if you have two guys that can succeed 13 to 15 yards down the field, boy, oh boy, does that make your offense that much better. But Dallas Goedert alone makes your offense that much better. And we talk about the big three. Well, if you lose 33% of the big three, and at the position which happens to not have another guy there, where wide receiver has Devontae or AJ, vice versa, if one of them were to get hurt, Dallas goes down and the drop-off is off a cliff. Why is he such a big X factor? Because he's so good. He plays in a position that is important for the Eagles. It's an extension of the offensive line. Jeff Stoutland includes Dallas Goedert into his plans when he comes to offensive blocking schemes for a reason. Because he's one of the top 3 blocking tight ends in the National Football League. Nick Sirianni and now Brian Johnson will trust him in the passing game in every area of the field. They love to use him in quite literally every facet of the passing offense. Whether it's in short areas where he can continue to build on his yards after the catch, whether it's in downfield seam areas, whether if he's getting lit up over the middle, Dallas Goedert is integral to this offense. And if he goes down for an extended period of time, 2-3 games you can get by, but if he's down, let's say, half the season, how big of an effect does that have, not just on him, but on Jalen Hurts, on Dallas Goedert, on A.J. Brown? Because now you can send more help their way. You don't have to worry about one of those tight ends. The domino effect of losing Dallas is the thing that ultimately gets to me, where I say, man, I can't see a world or an offense where the Eagles are at the top of the top in the NFL without the top tight end in the league right now. And he happens to be in Philadelphia, or one of them rather, with Travis Kelce, George Kittle, take your pick. Dallas Goedert, he's just as good as all 3 of them, and he needs to be in Philadelphia for this offense to succeed. As for the defense, I think there's one player in particular, especially a young player, who hasn't seen much playing time in the National Football League, but could be the ultimate X factor for this Philadelphia Eagles roster going into the year 2023. But before we continue our discussion on X factors of this Philadelphia Eagles team, we have a message from our friends over at FanDuel. If you haven't heard about FanDuel yet, what are you waiting for? I'm on it quite literally every single day. It's MLB season right now, and if you aren't getting in on the Phillies having this incredible run where you're getting 10 times your money on your first bet, if you haven't gotten in now, I would say no better time than the present to get up to $200. Yes, $200 win or lose back at FanDuel. What do? You go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, or you download the FanDuel app right on your phone, iPad, wherever you get internet. Go there today. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and get up to $200 in bonus bets today. You put in up to $200, you'll get up to $200 back. Bet at MLB, bet on soccer, bet on UFC that's going on every single weekend. We're going to be in football season before you know it. Get in on the action today. FanDuel, the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network and the official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, everyone, taking you in to segment 2 here on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. As always, I'm your host, Gino Camilleri, joining you on the longest-running daily podcast of the Philadelphia Eagles. We are in our off-season a little bit, so only 3 shows these next couple weeks, but as training camp kicks off, that weekend of the 15th, we're going to get right back into everything, talking position groups, talking who is going to be the biggest make or break player, which we are starting to preview right now. Who are some potential additions that they could bring in, some guys that they could bring in on the waiver wire, what are the camp battles, all that and more in about a week or so. But right now we are talking about X factors. We talked about offense, talked about Dallas Goedert in the tight end position, how pivotal that position has been to the Philadelphia Eagles, not just in the last 5 years or so, but the biggest play in the Super Bowl, arguably the biggest 2 plays in the Super Bowl, were made by Zach Ertz, who was a tight end, Brent Selleck before him, Chad Lewis, the list goes on and on. On defense, here's a position where there really hasn't been that star power, I would say, over the last 10 years or so. But there's one player in particular who, when he was drafted, you could just tell he had a different charisma about him. When he played at Georgia, there was just a different charisma about him. For somebody like me who's 5'8", a 5'11" short king, Nakobe Dean, he is going to be not just the most important player in the middle of the Philadelphia Eagles defense, but arguably the heartbeat and the culture setter moving forward. Because what you lost in your defensive secondary last year is not just your two starting linebackers, TJ Edwards and Kaiser White. TJ over the last 4 years or so was a tackling monster, barely missed any tackles. Kaiser White comes in and plays that number 2 role exceptionally well next to him. And even behind them, you had Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Marcus Epps, who were tackling phenoms. Right now, you lose all of those guys. Your green dot caller is a player who played sparingly in rotational minutes in a defensive unit where he wasn't the first guy. He wasn't the second guy. He was the third guy. Now he's going to be the number 1. But the good thing about that, though, at Georgia, he did exactly that. And he played behind Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and Jordan Davis. And in the sparing minutes that you did see out of Nakobe Dean last year, I thought he looked pretty darn good. When you could come into those moments and it looks like you know what you're doing at the linebacker position. Because if you take a trip down memory lane, there's a player who wore the number 47 in Philadelphia who I wasn't too fond of. His name was Nate Geary. And when you would watch Nate Geary play, every single snap looked like he was a step or two behind the action. He was more reactionary. He was more of a throw and chase type of player. Nakobe Dean has something that you can't truly teach, and that's the instincts at the linebacker position. The ability to know where to be before you have to be there. And not only that, but at 5'11", you could say, man, he's going to get manhandled at the line of scrimmage. I don't know about that. You talk about play strength. You talk about willingness, compete level. Nakobe Dean has all of that. And you talk about the drop-off and why he is the biggest X factor, in my opinion. It's because at defensive line, we know what'll happen if you lose 2, 3, even full starting rotation of those guys. Cornerback, you don't have 2 All-Pros behind 2 current All-Pros, but you have some solid young depth there that you have brought in a multitude of different ways. Safety, you're trying to find that next guy. Reed Blankenship brings a lot of tackle productivity back year over year. Sidney Brown brings a high prowess from Illinois. Terrell Edmonds should be a tackling machine. Justin Evans, will see what he can do. But at linebacker, open up the mailbox, there's cobwebs behind Nakobe Dean. There's nobody. It's Morrow and Shaun Bradley and Ben Van Summeren and Christian Ellis and a whole bunch of guys that more than likely are practice squad players any day of the week. And no disrespect to them, but coming off of a year where you arguably had your best linebacking production since the mid-2000s, you're going to be hard-pressed to say that you can take a step back in that regard and succeed as well as you did last year. Because why were the Eagles so good at moments in the National Football League last year and succeeded in areas where they might not have in the past? Well, they had athleticism in the middle of the football field, which they hadn't had before. And it wasn't just that linebacker, it was that safety as well. Look at how badly they were hurting just to find somebody that could even marginally play linebacker when TJ Edwards had nobody beside him. When Nate Geary was out there floundering around, when Zach Brown was running a 4.9 at that time in his career when they brought him in to play linebacker. They hadn't invested in a linebacker in the draft since Michael Kendricks, for goodness sake. And you're looking back in that and saying, man, even the play he had in the Super Bowl, it was average. It was on par. But can it get better? I think for the first time, you're looking at a player who truly can bring that element to this football team. Not just through his play on the field, but, man, being at Keely Ringo's draft party, it was Nolan Smith's draft party. One of the guys that got drafted from Georgia, just that brotherhood that those guys have together and that they're all going to come out and play for each other right away. And who led them. It was Jordan. It was Nakobe. Those were the guys that led them to the first national championship, to the team that would best Alabama for the first time in years. Why can't he do that here? Why can't he take those minutes that he had last year and expound on them greatly if he's fully healthy? He's young. He has a year where he didn't put many miles on his tires. And he's going to be a year further into the National Football League, understanding defenses, understanding blocking schemes from offenses, having those instincts at that level. It's always the discussion when I coach lacrosse here. We always say, should we put this 9th grader on varsity just so for a year he can get used to that speed? Well, that's kind of what the NFL is. That first year, outside of a handful of guys here and there that really go above and beyond, a lot of the first-year players, they're in the middle of the pack. They're just getting by. Well, Nakobe Dean, he doesn't have that excuse anymore. He's a second-year guy who's going to be tasked with taking on the signal calling of the defense, and there's quite literally nobody behind him. If you talk about an X factor, I mean, this is a 15, 10, I mean, whatever you want to call it, put a 10X stamp on it. Nakobe Dean is vitally important to the heartbeat of this defense. As I said with Dallas Goedert, can I see a world in an offense where they win without Dallas Goedert? It would be tough, but I could see it. Because I see a world where Nakobe Dean is out for 10, 15 games and they win a Super Bowl? Absolutely not. Do they even win the division at that point? Is it hyperbolic? It might be a little hyperbolic to say that one person is that important. But you'll understand that they don't have what they had last year in the defensive secondary. There will be times where there will be a play and you say, dang, Chauncey might have made that. TJ might have made that play. Well, if you don't have Nakobe, you're going to be saying that basically snap in and snap out. Nakobe Dean goes as the Eagles defense goes and vice versa. They need this kid to produce. And I'm excited for him. I'm excited for the opportunity to watch Nakobe Dean play in and play out, because when you watched him, he was explosive. He loved coming downhill. He loved getting a hat on a hat and just making contact. And I truly believe this kid is going to be one of those guys that you look back in Eagles lore, as long as he continues this trajectory and is healthy and can stay on the football field, where you're saying, man, he really made an impact on that defense. Not the Dawkins of the world, but like the Jeremiah Trotters, where you're saying, man, you don't want to go over the middle. You don't want to have to deal with that guy. You don't want to have to deal with Nakobe Dean. How long has it been since you said that in Philadelphia? Wouldn't it be nice? I think it would. I think Nakobe Dean has all of what it takes and more to become that guy. So to finish up today's show, we're going to get into what I call Gino's Guide to Scouting. And when we come back, we are going to get into a discussion on one topic in particular, play speed. All right, everyone, finishing up this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thank you to our everydayers for joining us here every single day, off season, regular season, draft season, 12 months a year, 5 days a week. The only place you can do it is here at LOE with us, Gino Camilleri, your host, as always, and DiBiase, Lou, we call him. He is on vacation currently. I'm also on vacation, as you could see, those watching on YouTube. But thank you for joining us. We always love talking the Birds, because when we come on these airways, we can always connect about one topic, and that is the Philadelphia Eagles. But there's also a topic that I love discussing too, that it has more to do with the grand scheme of football. That is scouting. That is getting these guys from high school to college to the National Football League. And one of the ways that we do that is breaking down these guys when it comes to attributes, when it comes to height, weight, speed, for example. You hear about the 40 all the time. We watch the 40-yard dash every February when they go to Indianapolis, put all those guys in underwear, and you watch 300-plus guys, and then all the pro days run 40 times. It's arguably the biggest drug on Twitter at that time. Let me find out a guy's 40. Well, when it comes to scouting, you of course have to know that. But at the same time, there's what is called play speed. Play speed, this is defined as the speed that the player shows on the football field. When the pads are on, when the helmet's on his head, can this player match what he puts out on the track? And why I brought this discussion up was because Devin Allen was talked about in an article the other day after winning another track hurdle championship. The guy's unbelievable, that he says he's the fastest player in the National Football League. I would tend to agree that if you put anybody on a track with Devin Allen, he smokes them. He blows them out of the water. But when you put a helmet on and you put the pads on and you put the cleats on and you're playing on turf and you're not playing on a hard track and you're not playing without any contact, that speed is a lot different than your play speed. And play speed, how do you identify this? Well, there's a multitude of different ways. You look at it and you say, wow, that guy's fast. Tyreek Hill, for example. Look at him. Yeah, that guy plays pretty fast. He can get from 0 to 40 on a football field or on a track in the blink of an eye. But at the same time, how does that play speed translate to their position? Because you could be a fast edge rusher, right? But if that's the only thing you could do is be fast and be out of control, are you going to be earning playing time? You look at the safety position. If you're just one speed sideline to sideline and you have no ability to change angles and you have no ability to turn on a dime, well, then play speed doesn't matter. But when you take play speed and you could quantify it and associate it to a position, for example, what would I say are 3 positions that play speed is arguably the most important? Wide receiver, cornerback, and running back. I would also throw linebacker in there. Because when you're looking at a linebacker, yeah, it would be great if he runs a 4.4, right? But can he really get through traffic and get through sideline to sideline and be able to make a tackle? Does he have the instincts to not think when he's on the move? Play speed isn't just pressing the button on a stopwatch and pressing it again and figuring out how fast that player moves. No, it's understanding the entire repertoire and everything that goes into equating to play speed. How does the player run? Like physically, how does he run? Does he have a weird gait? Does he take too big of a stride? Are his ankles too weak? Does he understand the game quick enough to make it seem like he's not thinking on the football field? Is he playing under control or is he just too fast for his own good? And Devin Allen, you could say you're the fastest guy in the National Football League, but when it all is said and done, there's a reason Tyreek Hill is in the position he is in, and Devin Allen is on the practice squad for the Philadelphia Eagles. You look at play speed when it comes to track times, and that not equating to success on the National Football League football field. Darius Hayward-Bay, John Ross. Yeah, you could play fast, but are you a Ferrari? Or are you just one of those Toyotas that happen to have their brakes loose about 10 years ago and that had to get recalled? That's what play speed is. And I hope you enjoy these conversations. And if you do, please let me know on Twitter. I hope to keep doing them as time progresses. We could talk a lot about scouting and the science behind it. And I just thought it was an interesting time, especially with a lot of track events going on. You have the World Championships going on at any given time this time of year. And that's exactly what Devin Allen was competing in. And there's so much science going into it and figuring out how fast these guys move. And you look at the guys in all of these camps right now at high schools, they're all wearing the catapult vests, and that maps your miles per hour. That maps your acceleration, your deceleration. It's such a science. And how it equates to the football field is arguably the hardest science to figure out. How can a player who is so fast not be fast on a football field or not be able to use his speed on a football field? That's what makes scouting so interesting. That's what makes the Darius Hayward-Bays versus the Tyreek Hills the reason some scouts keep their job and some scouts earn a promotion. And right now, the last thing I'm going to do is promote the Locked On Eagles podcast. So thank you for joining us here on LOE. Make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL, all of the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Phillies is going on right now. They're in season. Make sure you go check them out. Subscribe to Locked On Flyers to cover all the free agent action, as well as Locked On Sixers. Make sure you go check on Locked On NFL Scouting. Those guys are always breaking down things NFL. Make sure you check us out on Twitter. You could find me at GC24_football. Follow my co-host at DiBiase_LOE, and make sure you follow our main page at Locked On Birds. Lou has you on Friday. Tomorrow is the last event before my wedding that I have to take care of, so Lou will take you into the weekend. But for now, I'm signing off. Make sure you check us out every single day, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube as well, in video forms. For me, Gino Kamler, I'm signing off. But as always, thank you for downloading, thank you for watching and listening, and fly, Eagles, fly.